Okay, so today we're going to take a look at dividing decimal patterns. I made a little video for you, but it didn't have sound, so I'm going to go back and kind of narrate what I did. If you read this question, it says, the factory making math cards ships a box with decks of cards to a warehouse. How much does each deck of cards weigh? I'm going to look at the picture. I noticed that there are 1,000 decks, and the whole box weighs 275 pounds. I have to figure out how much each little deck of cards weighs. So I'm going to go ahead and make my know and find chart. I know that I have 1,000 decks of cards. I know that all of those cards put together weigh 275 pounds. I'm going to think about that for a little bit. So I've got this big box, and inside the big box are a whole bunch of little boxes. So I have to figure out how I'm going to split that 275 pounds up into 1,000 little amounts of weight, because each card deck weighs a lot less than 275 pounds. And if you want to be copying this down on a piece of paper, that would be fine too. Sometimes it's always good to follow along and take notes, just like if we were in class. Okay, so now that I kind of figure out what I have to find, I'm going to make a picture in my mind. As I make this picture in my mind, I'm going to think about all the little decks inside that add up to 275. The reason I'm taking time to do this is it'll help me see if my answer is reasonable or not. Okay, now that I've got that out of the way, let's think about doing the math. Because I'm going to be looking at a bunch of pounds, all made up of a lot of little amounts of weight, I'm going to be dividing. I can almost picture in my mind taking that 275 pounds and splitting it up into 1,000 different little piles. So my number sentence is going to say 275 divided by 1,000 equals some number. My answer is most likely going to be smaller. In fact, it should be smaller than 275 pounds because there are 1,000 decks of cards, and if they each weighed 275 pounds, that wouldn't make sense. So I'm going to work backwards and use the inverse operation. I'm going to think to myself that some number, meaning the weight of each deck of cards, times 1,000 will give me 275 pounds. This is a related multiplication sentence, but it can help us make sure that we're getting a reasonable answer. So now I'm ready to do my math. I'm going to think about what I need to do to solve my number sentence. 275 divided by 1,000. Well, I'm going to start by writing this number. And I know that if I'm dividing something by 1,000, I'm making it 1,000 times smaller. So if I move it there, it's 10 times smaller. Now I'm making that number 100 times smaller. Finally, I'm making the number 1,000 times smaller by moving the decimal to the left. 1,000 is 10 to the third power, so I'm moving that decimal 3 times. I'm going to see if this answer makes sense. Well, 275 thousandths is a lot less than 275. So my thought process is that it does make sense. I can probably check by going back to my inverse operations. So if I have 1,000 decks of cards, and they each weigh 275 thousandths, the whole weight of the whole box is going to be 1,000 times greater than 275 thousandths. So when you make a number larger, you move the decimal to the right 3 places. And yes, that definitely makes sense because 275 is 1,000 times greater than 275 thousandths.